the first degree of anger. Some men, they have the second degree of anger. And the rest, they have the third degree. Because sometimes, as Imam Shafi'i said, only the donkey doesn't get angry.
I think the thing is, I mean, listening to all of this, don't get into arguments in the first place. Because it's what it is. It's that chain, you know, you start to argue, and then from the argument, the anger starts, and then with the anger, and this is the shaitan. His favorite soldier is the one who keeps on pestering the husband and the wife. The shaitan sits on his throne in the water, and that his soldiers come, I did this, you did nothing, go away, go away. And then one comes, he said, I stayed with this man and his wife, and I made them argue. And I kept staying with making them argue until they divorced. And he says, come, you know, you did good.
SubhanAllah, that's another thing. It's like between husband and wife, when they fight, you know, sometimes I would say, you know what, shaitan is happy right now. Let's team up against shaitan, and let's stop arguing and so on.
But is it possible not to argue?
You can avoid it, it's not possible, but he said probably avoid. Sometimes the arguments are unnecessary. I mean, they're really silly things, and as they say, you know, they make people blow things out of proportion. It's a small thing. I mean, you found that your brown sock is with the black sock for the 50th time, and that shouldn't be the case. And so that becomes a reason for, I mean, khalas, it's done, you know. Go pick the other one from the other one.
There was a brother who wasn't married, and he said, when I get married, inshallah, I'm not going to have any problems with my wife.
That's what he thought.
Yeah, and I said, okay, you know, I started laughing right. But I said, you know, what's your plan? He said, it's going to be easy. Everything she wants, I'm just going to say, okay, honey.
Wow.
I'm going to say, yes, honey. And then I started laughing because I go, you so have no experience.
This, and subhanAllah, disputes and arguments.
Is he still married now?
Yeah, he's married.
I believe that disputes and arguments are inevitable. They have to happen. It's not an issue by itself. We can talk, because it's not do this, yes sir. Simon says, stay there, yes sir. There has to be communication and arguments, but there is a limit. What I find out of my experience doing marriage counseling, that a lot of the problems are what you can call old files. So I'm talking with my wife about the red and brown, well, I would never wear a red sock, but a brown and black sock, for example, and why they're always mixed up. And she said, well, sorry, I forgot, I didn't see it. And then I opened old files 30 years ago. This is what you always say. You remember what you did on the wedding night? Did you see what your father did 20 years ago? And look at your brother, and look at your mother, and look at what this, and I bring old files that she thought that we're done with that. And she does the same. And you did this, you did that, you gave the money to your family, you didn't give the money for us, you took your brother to a good school, your son is not in a good school. And things that I thought that, come on, it's been ages. So among the top reasons for problems is opening old files and digging into the past, which people should not do. Ya akhi, it's in the past, move on.
But people love doing it.
And this is why it causes issues and problems in marriages. Not only that, it goes out of proportion when the argument is not only what's in the house stayed in the house. When she goes on the phone and she says, Mom, he did this, he did that. And I go on the phone, or I visit my mother and I tell her that, wallahi, she didn't do a good job cooking, she's a bad wife, she always nags me. And I am causing a drift between the two families. So when my wife goes to visit her mother-in-law, my mother, and she's happy and she's bringing her a gift, my mother has been already fueled with my complaints and she's not ready to receive her in a good manner.
It reminds me of a story that they say, I don't know how factual it is, but they say that a man got in a fight with his wife and his wife went to her parents. And so he went to his in-laws and he's trying to work things out, and she's trying to use her family as defenders. He said, if you're a man, meet me outside.
Subhanallah.
He's telling his wife, if you're a man, meet me outside. So he's trying to work it out with her like he would work it out with a man, like he's going to go and knock her out and punch her. And so sometimes when they bring their in-laws as defenders, like a soccer match kind of thing, it complicates the problem. It becomes many people get involved. It could have been something very simple, then it gets way more complex, and then the problems become more difficult to resolve. So should the spouses learn to contain? I think we spoke about keeping the problems at home and not exposing them unless one is seeking some.
When it's reaching a dead end, only in this case, yes, you may ask for consultation.
The part you were talking about with, they're bringing up old files. I find another big issue is that also bringing up old gifts. So the man, for example, or the woman, they go back and forth about, I did this, she says, you did nothing for me. And he says, I dropped the kids off at school, I go to work, this. She said, well, what about me? I made you food, I washed your clothes. And then it's a manni wal adha back and forth. That's the worst situation. I tell myself that if that starts up, the argument goes in that direction, I immediately say that if I did any of those things, I did it for Allah. I didn't do it so that I'm going to bring it up one day and say, like, I'm making a bank account of the good deeds that I did. And so I stop. I just stop it. I'm like, if the other person wants to go in that direction, my recommendation is just like, you know what? You can say that you did that for me. Well, I did my actions for Allah, so I'm just going to stop talking.
It's also, by the way, reminding people of your generosity.
Yes.
Is one of the things that Allah will not look at you and Allah will not purify you on the Day of Judgment. It's a very serious thing to recount to a person and make them feel obliged to you, I think the other thing is that, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
There's a verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We feed you for the sake of Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We don't seek from you any compensation, and we don't need you to even say thanks. And that's where we wish somebody comes into their marriage with, when they do the good things for their spouse, that they do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's going to solve a big chunk of
I believe there's another ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah specifically about that they do not follow up their sadaqah with reminders of goodness and harm, because it does. And then Allah described the insincerity, as you had mentioned earlier.
I think one of the things that I tend to notice in marriage is that people often forget that your wife and your husband is still your brother and sister in Islam. So all the things that Allah and His Messenger have told us about the rights of a Muslim still apply to your husband and your wife.
Excellent.
I find it really strange. It's like that seems to go out of the window. So the thing about hiding your brother's faults, that whoever hides their brother's faults in this life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I mean that really motivates me to think that if you hide your brother's fault in this life, Allah will cover your faults on the Day of Judgment. I think I need my faults to be definitely covered up on the Day of Judgment. And isn't this true, therefore, with your wife? I find it really strange that someone would go to tell, the wife's family or your mother or about your wife's faults or your husband. I mean, I find that extraordinary, but obviously, it happens. But what happened to covering the faults of a Muslim? What happened to advising someone privately and not exposing their faults? These are very important Islamic etiquettes.
Here, I would like to add that a piece of advice for the sisters. Even when you are seeking advice, don't say my husband. It's better if you put it in the third person. Maybe I know your husband. Or if you want to seek the advice from your mother, say, mother, as a sister, you're not lying. A sister is having this problem. So the mother will give you the piece of advice. But the moment you tell her, Mom, I have this problem, now she will.
Sometimes she may side with you.
Yeah, will be on your side, and she will be reacting emotionally. So what is more important, that you want to get this help without exposing your husband, without...
That's from the etiquettes of seeking advice.
Exactly.
Well, this is the end of the episode, but inshallah we'll be back for more. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A way of life, a way of life, a way of life, a way of life. Islam is a way of life, a complete way. Do you know what Islam says? It says that life's the greatest test. It says that life's a borrowed space, returned upon rest. A way of life, a way of life, a way of life, a way of life. Islam is a way of life.